Hello everyone, and again, welcome to Reinvent Virtually. Indra, it is so wonderful to have you as part of this fireside chat between the two of us. I've always been amazed at you and your career over the years, and I think there's going to be so many that are listening today that's going to be so excited. This is all about leadership, women and leadership. And I want to kick off a question and talk to you about relationships around the world. When I at AWS, when I go around the world, I try to spend time with women leaders at AWS and get to know them. But I've
Mm.
also found that it's important for me to connect with women outside of AWS in different organizations in different industries. And I wondered if you could talk about you're a busy gal. How have you done this over the years, and how have you made it a priority to make those connections with other women leaders?
Oh, great question. And thank you again for having me, Teresa. It's a real privilege to speak at reInvent. I've heard so much about it over the years. So thank you for having me. When I was CEO for 12 years, I traveled the whole world. And every place I went, I had to do two things. One is meet our own employees, then meet local leaders. But then I added the third leg, which is to get involved with local women's organizations. And the reason I added that is because I felt that a lot of the women wanted to see role models, and I didn't want to confine it just to PepsiCo's women. Additionally, I think PepsiCo got a better image in the country when you reach out and build bridges with other women leaders because they now felt a certain relationship with PepsiCo. So I did it for the sake of enhancing our own company's reputation. And what we did was we found the best women's organization in every country that we had major operations. Our people were already involved in those organizations. So we'd reach out to the leader of that organization, and they would host a special reception or a speech and a Q&A with the women. And, I would take 2 or 3 hours out of my day to make sure I did that particular event. That to me was as important as the rest of the business I was doing. And I think it's because I really believe that women are awesome, as you and I would know, but I think they can contribute so much. And what we need to do is to show them examples of women who've done it, show them role models, and give them optimism that they too can rise up in the corporate ladder, whichever ladder they want to rise up in.
That's so true. And I wonder, as you went around the world and you visited all your different sites with PepsiCo, was there any one thing that kind of stood out to you of different women, questions they asked you that came up during those visits?
Interestingly, I thought most of the questions they would ask me was about work-life balance. Surprisingly, that was asked, but more towards the end of the discussion. The upfront piece was, tell us about how you manage through difficult issues. How do you make change management happen? How do you bring others along with you? How do you build teams? How do you do succession planning? So the women questions were not any different than the questions asked by all the men leaders. So the women had the same sorts of issues, same sort of concerns, and they too were running big organizations or big divisions. Towards the end of the conversation, of course, it always went down to, we all have hopes, aspirations, and dreams, but somehow we have so many other responsibilities that it feels like our hopes and aspirations and dreams on the career side may be thwarted by some of the other stuff we have to do. Tell us how you balanced it. And that's when we got really down to how do we, bring work and life together? What kind of support system do you need? Who needs to provide the support system? And how do you develop the inner fortitude to do 3 jobs at the same time? That's when we talked about those issues.
I think that's so true. I've been asked that a lot. We call it a lot of times work-life harmony because you can't, like, how do you
Mm.
balance it all and have harmony?
Yep.
It's interesting. I find young women today ask also more about how do you create a career track? And,
Mm.
I think you and I both are passionate about making sure that women have every possible opportunity for their career, no matter what stage in life they are, whether it's ready to have children, having those children, or taking care of loved ones in their family. They are responsible for so much of this. And Indra, I'd like to jump to COVID. We're in unprecedented times right now. something that none of us ever realized we'd be in. And do you have advice for how we can kind of stop the bleeding here with the amount of women that are having to leave the workplace as a result of COVID?
COVID has been a major challenge for everybody in the world. I didn't think I'd ever see a time when 3/4 of the world would be shut down. I never thought I'd see a time when we were looking at a second surge and perhaps looking at a second slowing down of economies. And so this has been an existential crisis for a lot of people. Now, every time there's a crisis in the world, women end up stepping up disproportionately at home. And that's what's happening in this crisis. What's happening is that women are not just women managers or workers in the paid workforce. They're also doing double duty as teachers at home. And we've all come to realize now that school was a form of childcare. You don't think of it that way. You think of it as sending kids off to school. School was a form of childcare. Our teachers were both teachers and childcare workers. So we lost that support system completely. We lost the support system of the teachers tutoring the kids. So not only are the children not going to school, you are now the tutor for the kids. And on top of that, you've got to keep them occupied, not only during the evenings, but right through the day while you're doing your job. And so I think women have had it really tough. Now, I'm hearing that a lot of men have stepped up to the plate to help out, but women are still shouldering a disproportionate amount of the burden. I don't think we can do anything about what's happened so far. I think it's going forward that we have to talk about what needs to get done. I think, first of all, childcare centers, we have to find a way to open them safely. Because without childcare centers functioning with some critical mass of children, because if you only have 2 kids, the childcare center can't open up. With the critical mass of kids, with the appropriate safety mechanisms, if we don't open up childcare centers, I think women will continue to struggle. Second, I think we ought to put out some sort of a PSA, a public service announcement, asking men to step up to the plate. Because I think in this first surge, women did a disproportionate amount of the work. In this second surge, I think we should send out a plea to the men saying, let's see how you can contribute a little bit more. Because, look, marriage and child rearing are all a partnership. It's not one person doing it. It has to be a partnership. As I tell my husband, it's not my kids, it's our kids. Let's focus on the our. They're grown up, but he takes our kids very seriously. I think we've got to do some sort of a PSA which says it's your joint life, joint ownership of kids, joint ownership of responsibilities, and everybody should contribute equally. Because my fear is that if women have to do too much, and therefore they can't function at work and therefore fall behind, but more importantly, get burned out because of the stress, it doesn't help the family, it doesn't help the economy. And I think we ought to be very cognizant of these second-order effects, if I may say so.
Yeah, completely agree. And, during these times, we started this in March already. We're going to turn around. It's going to be a new year, and we'll have been at this for 12 months. And I've seen my own team change over the months. And I finally would say to them, hey, we have to just laugh at some of this stuff. Like if you're on video conference and your child walks in, your dog, your cat walks across the table and your children want to sit on your lap, fine, let them come in. We have to kind of operate with grace. We're in such unprecedented times and there's enough stress at home. And Ender, the one thing we've found, depending on where you are in the world, some of the home sites are very small. So it's challenging for both to work from home, take care of their family. And I do think operating in these times, with patience, with grace, and allowing your team to have time to decompress and just, get out of the zone of work all the time is really important. We've seen that. We've been lucky at Amazon. We have not lost. We are not seeing a mass exodus of women. And I hope that's an indicator that we are doing some things right. I'm sure that we still have a lot of things to learn, but we are trying to be super flexible and making sure that we are taking care of our employees, as well as, of course, our customers every day.
No, I think that's the very good news about Amazon. I think what this pandemic has showed us is that flexibility is good up to a certain level. but only working from home is probably not okay because there's no way to let off any steam. In a way, when you get to work and come back, it's a release of the pressure. And so whether people actually commute long distances to go to an office or they do what Canada is experimenting with, go to a co-working space which has a childcare facility attached to it. So you go to a co-working space, leave your child in the childcare, pick up the child after the work session is over and come home.
I want to jump for a second to kind of leading during times like this in the pandemic. Of course, you've run a global, huge corporation, and you've seen lots of different phases happen over the years. But during this time in the pandemic, we haven't faced anything really like this, and we've seen a lot of leaders that are required to make decisions with imperfect information, imperfect data. How do you approach decision making when data is scarce? How have you done that in the past, and do you have advice for any of those listening?
Look, when you have a situation like we've all just been through with COVID or going through in COVID, the best you can do is learn as you go along. Okay. And as you learn, as you get more information and learn as you go along, be very honest in communicating the information to the public without creating a sense of panic. So you've got to show that you know what you're doing. You've got to show that you are fully educated on the scope of the problem and the solution set that's available. You've got to inform public that this is a serious issue. At the same time, don't tell them to run for the doors because there are no doors. And so I think the challenge of the leader is much more difficult because you've got to become a student yourself. I know that when I took over the co-chairmanship of Reopen Connecticut, the first thing I did is I went and sat with the public health and epidemiology people at Yale and said, teach me everything you can about this particular virus, about public health, about epidemiology, and what should I think about when we are co-chairing this Reopen task force. So it's important that leaders become students, because unless you zoom in to really understand the details, you can't zoom out to understand what you have to do. And once you zoom out, it's very important you form a team of experts. Let the experts speak while everybody knows you're there supporting the experts. And I say this because how much ever you're a student, as long as you have not been in the discipline, you might say something wrong, which you don't want to do. Because as a leader, whatever you say goes viral, right? So when I was a leader and I was facing crises, I'd zoom in, learn everything, but I'd bring my scientists, my public policy people in my case, and say, you guys talk to the employees or to the public, but just know I'm there for you always. If there's a real problem, punt to me. I'll go in front of the people. But day to day, you take the questions. But it requires constant learning, Teresa, which is a real challenge because every time you get new information, you've got to become a student again. And you've got to show that you're interested in the details as much as you're interested in, showing that everything is going to be okay and sort of a showing calm. I don't think this is the time to show calm. This is the time to show knowledge and depth.
Yeah. And you're right, because I do believe both employees and citizens, they want transparency. They want to understand what's happening. And one of the things, Indra, that I love that you've been really involved in is your work in Reopen Connecticut with Governor Lamont. And you and I have talked about this because I run our public sector business. We've seen state government, all governments, but state governments have had to really fast revector. And they've done that through a variety of means, which I want to discuss with you. But also I want to dive into, we're going to head into another phase where now the states have to actually start distributing the vaccinations that are now being developed. So we're going to head into how are they successful there. But can you talk about your experience from a large corporation to helping a state, and how has that been, and what you've kind of learned that the needs are and things that we could potentially be doing better that we missed this round?
Well, again, I want to preface everything I'm saying by drawing attention to the fact that the last time we had a pandemic was 102 years ago. So there's nobody really that has that knowledge base. And it was never codified to a point where somebody just pulls out pandemic volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. So you had to write the rules as you went along. That made the challenge even bigger. The biggest issues that I saw running Reopen Connecticut, co-chairing Reopen Connecticut, is that we didn't know how to interface with the federal government or other states. When you have a crisis and you're managing it, you set up a structure where there's a federal government structure, then every state mirrors that structure so you can dock into the federal structure. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very important the next time, if we ever have an epidemic or an outbreak or any sort of a crisis, that we have a mirrored structure. So in the state, when we had to get PPE, we know exactly who to go to for PPE. Yeah. And if it's a small state, instead of every small state calling the federal government, band together as a region, talk to the federal government so that they too can allocate their resources. Similarly, testing. There should have been a testing group that talks about how do you get a low-cost testing? What's the information on testing? What happened through this is that we didn't have these structures set up with great clarity. And as a consequence, we were all flailing and beginning to compete with each other. So that was problem number one. The second is viruses know no borders. You cannot contain a virus in a border. So this was the time when we actually had to cooperate across countries to decide who comes in, who doesn't come in, how do we control it in every country. We had to have coordinated action. This was a time also that multilateral institutions didn't work as well as they should have, and we all retreated into country borders. Second problem. The third is that our healthcare system worked, and in some cases, not so well. I know in Connecticut, we were struggling for about 3 months whether the insurance companies were going to reimburse asymptomatic tests. To me, it's a no-brainer. At this point, when you have a crisis on your hands, you don't have a debate for 3 months on whether you're going to get a reimbursement for asymptomatic testing. You just do it because testing is the only way to assess who to separate out from the rest of the population. We were having debates on masks. These are all non-negotiable, non-debatable issues because I don't like to wear a mask too, Teresa. Don't get me wrong, it's stifling. But if it's going to protect other people and it's going to protect me, it behooves me to wear the mask. So I'm doing it out of patriotism and as a sense of duty to my citizens. And so I look at all this and go, I hope coming out of this pandemic, we create the new book. How should elements of society work? How do we coordinate all our activities? When do we shut schools? What happens when schools shut? We go to remote learning, but if there's no broadband access or no computers for kids, how are we going to do this? Teachers have never taught on Zoom. How are we going to teach them to teach on Zoom? We just told them to go to remote learning. So I think that we can't go reinvent the wheel here now. We can't rewrite the past. I think we have to lay the foundation for any future crisis and say, let's learn from this pandemic. Let's learn about what didn't work. Fix those aspects of society. Make sure we have all of the pieces in place. So God help if we ever have to address something like this. We are ready for it. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Half of the towns in Connecticut, and we're one of the wealthiest states in the country, the inner cities didn't have broadband access. Yeah. The kids didn't have a computer. How do they learn remotely then? So they fall behind, which is not good for society. So I think we have to really think about all of these aspects going forward.
It looks like we have a new president, Indra, and I've always said one of the best things that the president could do, our federal government could do, is make sure that every student has broadband access, every family, so they can have the same access. And we're starting to see this around the world really shape. And to your point, we've seen millions of students go online. I could tell you so many stories from our education business. Millions of students go online, but we have to be prepared for every student to be able to go online, not just a few. Because if not, then we're creating even greater divides, which no one wants, Indra.
I think, Teresa, along with roads, rails, and bridges, we should think of broadband as part of infrastructure.
Totally.
I think we do. Totally. We just have to do it. Yeah.
It's one of the greatest tools ever. for a minute, I'll just share, this is the greatest thing about cloud computing. It's a differentiator that can help everyone. And it also is a great equalizer because we see researchers, young, small researchers that only could have done their work earlier if they were at a big university with HPC. Now they can start and do research no matter where they are. And it's like, it is amazing. So I think both of us are big believers that technology is truly an enabler to create less of a divide on a global scale. So for those out there who don't know Indra, I've gotten to know her over the last couple of years, and I'm not trying to embarrass her, but she really is a very humble and amazing woman. She's accomplished so much, but I told the story the first time I met her. We went to her office in Connecticut, and she's so humble and hospitable, and you can see that she is very authentic. And I wanted to jump to that topic for a minute, Indra. You are, and how you've done a lot, and there's so many women who would love to know your secret sauce. But how have you been able to be authentic and stay who you are through your entire career journey? I think there's so many women out there that would like to know, how do they do that and grow their career and come out the other side saying, I'm who I am and I've done a great job as a leader?
That's an interesting question. I think the first thing I'd say to you is there's more effort required to be somebody else when you come to work or meet others than just being yourself. Because someday you may just forget to be this new avatar, and then people know that you're a fake. So I decided, you know what, I'm just one person. What you see in private is what you see in public, so I'm not going to have two avatars. So that's a decision I made a long time ago, because it's way better to just let people see who you are. They might say they don't like certain aspects of it, but tough, you get the good and the bad. So I decided I was going to be one avatar first. Point number two, I think some of us who have empathy, some people think you have to hide it when you become a CEO or a leader. I actually think empathy works because people like to be dealt with empathy. And I've never forgotten that. And so I let my empathy come out. And I like people. I like interacting with people. So the combination of the empathy and the fact that I like dealing with people, yields a very rich working relationship. And the third thing is, right through my life, I've realized that when you hire somebody into the company, you don't hire a person. You actually hire a family. They come along with a wife, a husband, and children, and family, uncle, aunt, and members of the community. You hire a whole ecosystem with that person. And if you want them to bring their whole self to work, you've got to bring that whole ecosystem to work, not physically, but emotionally. And so I've always tried to accommodate that whole person. So I'd ask people about their family. I'd be tuned to the issues they're going through and explore as much as possible how the company can help alleviate some of their issues. So I think if we start approaching every employee that way, not as a tool of the trade, but as a real asset coming in the door that's going to make a difference to the job, I think you'll have a very different relationship with them, and you'll come out as more empathetic and more authentic. And believe me, don't try to be two people, because you'll fall sometime and people say, oh my God, she's just putting on the airs here.
And consistency. I think people then know you're consistent and you are who you are, which makes a big difference. I think that's great advice. Andrew, we really didn't talk about this question, but are there characteristics that you see in solid leaders that you look for? When you were running PepsiCo, were there leaders that you said, I'm looking for these characteristics of individuals that I want, to place in my senior leadership team?
There's a lot of traditional leadership skills that we look for, but I look for two things that are a little bit unusual. One is curiosity. I like people who are just insanely curious, who want to dig in, then come out and zoom out, then dig in again and see how the assignment they've been given fits into a broader scheme of things. Are they asking the right questions about, why am I doing this assignment? How can I do it better so it docks into the rest of the assignments being done around me? I've always liked people who have that insane curiosity. And some of that curiosity can be fulfilled by them going and reading more or exploring more. Some of it can be addressed by them asking me questions. But I explicitly look for that. And, in today's world, if you want the talent that you think can rise in your company, they've got to be lifelong students. And to be a lifelong student, you have to have curiosity. So that's one thing I look for. The second is courage. I come across a lot of people who are so competent. I mean, just outstanding people. But when it comes to tough times, they just somehow melt. I want people who, with a solid backbone, face adversity and say, look, when shit happens, I'm going to be standing there and leading the troops. And you have to get those people because the world is an uncertain place. And if you don't have people with incredible backbone and courage, there's no point having just the most competent person who hides for the covers, so runs for the covers. So I look for curiosity and courage. These are the two special qualities that I keep testing for when I interview people at the senior most level for promotions or for hiring.
Do you think, Indra,
How
I
about
was
you?
telling someone, well, it's funny, last night I talked to a group in our Asia Pacific and Japan, and one of the questions they asked me, who was formational in your life and career? And I said, well, it sounds a little Pollyannish, but it was my parents, my mom and my dad both.
Yep.
My mom was the first female principal in the county I was from, which was in Kentucky, which you can imagine then, that was a long time ago. She taught in a one-room school classroom. And I never heard her complain. She never one time complained about going to work. She loved it. And she was always getting a new degree. She made straight A's. She was always teaching school, growing a garden, raising children, working in the community and church, and going to school. She's amazing. She's 91 today. My father was a basketball coach, and I learned a lot about teamwork from him. And I shared with someone, I love work. And the thing that strikes me about you is you love work. You love what you do. It's who you are. It's not separate to you. It's who you are and how you operate. And I feel that way. And my dad would never let us complain about getting up to going to work. He'd say, look, you can get up and go to work. You should be so happy. And I wondered with you if there was someone or something that shaped your thinking of how you operate and work today, and sort of, there's many things that shape us, but any one person or anything that, you'd like to comment on.
I think from the time I was born, my family, I won the lottery of life, if you want to call it that. I grew up not in a wealthy family, good middle class Indian family, but the men in my family, my father, my grandfather, insisted that the girls be educated. They insisted that the girls go as far as they want to go. If they want to work, they should. And remember, I came into business 15 years after India got independence. There were hardly any women in the workforce.
Yeah.
Yet my grandfather was so far ahead in their thinking that they said, let's let the women dream and fly. The boys can do it too. But as long as the girls have got brains and they want to work hard, let's allow them to fly. And I think that made all the difference in the world, Teresa, because if I hadn't had that solid start in my life, I don't know where I'd be. And along the way, people came in and said, I like what I see. Let me push her along. I like what I see. Let me push her along. And so one thing led to another. But if I hadn't had that basic support of the men in my family, my mother too, but the men in my family, would have been a tough slog.
Well, and Indra, I think that is really amazing, because what a lot of individuals may not know, my last trip to India, I had a young woman on one of my panels who was a leader in her village. And she talked about how that had been kind of taboo, actually. And she could not have done this leadership role without her parents allowing her. And she said they took a lot of flack in the beginning for allowing their daughter to kind of be out on the edge, taking a leadership role. And it was a very big eye opener for me. So that for you in that time, even, that was a really, really big deal. So I do understand you had a very progressive family, it sounds like, really encouraging you.
It's
So,
interesting. When I was a young kid, I played in an all-girls rock band, believe it or not. And, I'm surprised that my parents allowed me to play in this rock band. I learned to play the guitar on my own. It was not a very good rock band, but who cares? I thought my aunts and my uncles were all very conservative and old, would sort of look down upon me and say to my parents, how dare you allow her to do this? Instead, I found them humming the tunes. I found them telling other people, guess what? Our niece is in a rock band. So maybe, I was part of this change in society. But it's like you were given some freedom within a frame. And as long as you didn't push the frame out or break it, you had umpteen degrees of freedom within that framework, which is what I appreciated.
that's so good. Now I have to ask, do you still play the guitar?
I own a lot of guitars, and I have to choose between vanity, having nails, and playing the guitar. For the first time, I picked vanity.
I don't blame you. Me too. Yes, I agree. So Indra, I'm really excited about something you're doing, and I can't wait for it to come out. You and I talked about you are actually writing a book about your life and
Mm.
career. You've talked about that book a little bit, and my impression is it's not just going to be about your life and career, but it's also going to talk about your passion about how to get women into the workplace a lot more, the things we should be doing as leaders and thinking about. But can you give us a little teaser on your book
Sure.
that will be coming out soon?
So it will come out in September of next year. And it's a book about integrating work and family. Okay, that's really how do we allow people to integrate work and family? Because as a country, we need children. As a country, we need the best brains to be in paid work. So we have this dual need as a country, but we don't have all the best brains coming to work because they don't have the support system to have a family also. So how do we integrate work and family? What needs to change? So I wrote a book proposal and took it to the publishers who said that just writing a book about that without informing it with your life won't sell. So this book is about 65-70% memoir and the rest of it policy oriented, but informed by my story. So it's been quite a trip down memory lane, Teresa. And I tell you, it's not easy when you have to go back to your childhood and recreate the story and what kind of support everybody got along the way. It's an amazing journey. I didn't realize my own journey until I started to write about it, took it for granted. My hope is that people who read it would say, if Indra can do it, I can certainly do it. And so I want to give people hope and optimism. And more importantly, I want, as a government, as a society, as communities, for us all to step up, to make the right policy, take the right policy actions to enable women to be in the paid force and have children. That's my goal, my ultimate goal.
Well, it's really important you do memorialize your life and career because you're truly an inspiration for so many women and men around the world, Indra. And to be able, I actually hear a lot from young women leaders that they want more written from women leaders. So I think it's important, and so many look up to you. So thank you for doing that. We are gonna really look forward to your book.
Thank you.
Indra, before we go, I always one of my big things is I like to give people go do's. Like when I end anything, I want them to I want them to take away something and be able to action something. So before we kind of check out from our fireside chat today, what kind of go-dos do you have for the individual? Listen, we have leaders from around the world, men and women from all geographies listening in to our fireside chat today. What's the most important thing that they can all do to set themselves up for a successful 2021 year?
I want to start off by saying we all have to have a sense of optimism about 2021. Now, it's hard to say that given the doom and gloom that's going around from the second surge of the pandemic, but this too will pass. So it's very important we all have an eye towards that and say, in 2021, sometime during the year, this COVID will be behind us because the vaccine is ready. We also have drugs to take care of the effects of COVID. I think the innovation and the inventions going on around the world will result in fantastic treatment regimes and vaccines. So I'm actually approaching 2021 with a sense of optimism. And we all have to generate it from the inside, sense of optimism. Then we have to figure out how to use this moment of stillness to rethink humanity. How do we address inequality in our societies? How do we reimagine education? How do we figure out how we sign up for public service? Don't just abandon public service. Public service needs us more than ever before. Let's figure out how we can be role models for kids whose parents are all frontline workers. So I think this moment of stillness should give us all an opportunity to rethink what our contribution can and should be to this optimistic future. I've seen the worst, but I also have an incredible sense of optimism. And this time in 2021, we will have an in-person reinvent.
I couldn't agree with you more. Another thing I love about you, you're optimistic, and I'm too. I believe that we will get through this. We have the most innovative companies in the world, most of them attending here at reInvent and creating all kinds of models. I see them putting together economic and healthcare data to create a common operating picture so we know more. We have vaccines on the way. They're already out in many countries now testing. So I'm like you. I believe we're going to get through 2020 and 2021. We're going to look forward to a new future and learning from this pandemic, and then be able to look at those lessons, and hopefully there will not be another, but if there is, we'll be much more prepared. Indra, again, you are so kind to spend time with us. I want to leave the last kind of comment for you, and then we'll sign off with everybody.
First of all, thank you for having me again, Teresa. I think it's been a wonderful conversation, and it's a privilege to talk to the reInvent audience. I'll just close by saying, through this pandemic, one company that played a great role in helping people get through the pandemic is Amazon. I don't think we should forget that. I think we saved a lot of seniors' lives who didn't have to go shopping and get exposed to COVID. A lot of the time when we needed stuff that was not available in stores, Amazon brought it to us in a very short time. So I have deep gratitude for Amazon, not as a board member, but as a consumer, to say that thank God for a company like Amazon, we got through COVID well. So I'm proud to be part of the Amazon family too. And thank you for having me again on reInvent.
Well, we are proud to have you, and we are very grateful that across the Amazon families that we were able to do what we did, and we look forward to continuing to support our customers and partners worldwide, Indra. So thank you so much for your time. This was such a pleasure. And everyone out there at reInvent, enjoy all your time. Get to all the sessions. You're going to learn so much. And thank you for joining us today.